My name is Nzingha Dugas, and I'm the manager for the African American Female Excellence Initiative. So my connection to Black education in Oakland is not really intentional at all. I see myself as an activist and as a community development person. So when I left college, I went to work at the state capitol, thinking I would do some policy stuff and really thinking I would get some of these brothers out of jail. So I was on the path to law school. So I said, well, let me do a policy fellowship. And after that, I was like, this work really actually doesn't trickle down to my community, and I don't know if I could do this. Interestingly enough, I had a position with Barbara Lee, leaving that, and I turned it down. It's not something that you do. But I was adamant that I had to really go back to the community. Coming from being an activist, I was just adamant that we need to have spaces for children to do things besides just academic, that we didn't have a balance in our schools with arts and culture, and we absolutely did not have any sports activities. And so I participated in sports that kept me focused and doing things I needed to do. And so I just got right in the heart of East Oakland and started reaching out to places like Fremont and Frick and Havens Court. And I don't know what it is, but when people tell me don't go somewhere, somehow it's like, oh, it can't be that bad, and I'm just gonna go. So when I got to Havens Court and Frick, I absolutely loved it. There were some challenges for sure at Havens Court, but I looked at those kids and I saw possibility. And so I just embedded myself in Havens Court and Frick for several years, and they had really good principals who believed in what we were trying to do. And I started building out girls' work and started working with partners who were building out work for Black males. And the very thing that we're doing now is the very thing that we started at Havens Court. And I jumped in and I absolutely loved it. The other thing I did that was unprecedented was I started the first ever after-school basketball league for girls. And got a lot of heat for that, a lot of heat, but I played basketball, and a lot of my friends played basketball, and so I had a ready-made, set of coaches, and then we began to do overnighters for 50, 60, 70, 80 girls. No issues whatsoever, no problems, nothing. And then I saw the potentiality for this work, and I began to build out programs in the East. Let me start with the state of education for educators. And who comes to mind first are Black female teachers, because that is the majority. When we look at the number of Black teachers in Oakland, there's somewhere around the number of 585, and of that, 400 are women. And we look at the stress that's on those teachers. My concern is it is those Black teachers who are actually ministering to Black children. And so not only are they teaching, they're also doing after-school programs, they're also meeting with parents, they're also engaging with families. Burnout is real for those teachers. And then some of those teachers feeling like they need more support in multiple ways. Many of them are commuting because to live in Oakland is really expensive, so you add the commute time on that. For many of our teachers who are extremely dedicated and love their work and love our children, my concern is about their ability to be effective and also their own self-care. I also want us to be thoughtful and intentional about having more Black male teachers, but then making it attractive to them. If I want to teach, but I can't live here and I can't afford to live here and I can't afford to support my family or myself, that's not attractive. And the notion, I'm just keeping it real, right? So the notion that if I don't have resources or I don't have enough resources, that's hard to say, brother, I need you to be a teacher because we need you in the classroom. They may want to, their heart may say they want to, but the affordability is very, very difficult. The other problem around the state of education is what's happening inside our classroom. And so what girls are telling me is that when they ask questions, it's seen as I'm not being compliant, that I'm pushing against the teacher. So I can tell you multiple stories where girls just needed homework. They were out and they were very much involved with their with their homework. But one young lady said, I raised my hand and I said, I can't do the work without really knowing what the information that was yesterday. And the teacher kept saying, well, wait a minute. Well, the rest of the students were going on with the work. And so she leaned over and was like, can you tell me? And the instructor was like, I need you to sit and just wait. So after about 20 minutes, she went up to the desk and said, I know you asked me to wait, but class is almost halfway over. And so I need to know the information so I can do the work. So she told her to sit down. And so the young lady was like, this is not useful for me. I'm leaving out the classroom. So when you look at it from that vantage point, there's no learning happen there. There's no relationship happen there. All the data says children of color need to build a relationship with their instructor to feel like they're in a space where they can learn and they can engage. So that relationship to that teacher is going to impact her ability to learn. But I hear story after story after story. And then I go sit in classrooms. And then I know those stories to be true. I know those stories to be exceptionally true. When I think of the state of the family, and I think of particularly West and East Oakland, it's also a resource challenge. So when we talk about food insecurity, when we talk about resources, and when we talk about access to information as one thing, but then understanding that information that they're getting access to. One of the things that disturbed me is when I started doing interviews in the schools, that so many parents were telling me that when I come to school, I'm not seen as a support system for the child. And many schools do not have the kind of parent engagement they would like to or even want to. And so I've seen many cases where I see mothers who are Black come on campus and they don't feel welcome. Or they say, you know, Ms. Nzingha, the only time they call me is when there's a problem. And so when I think about families, there's so many resources that are needed. And just to get a little bit more granular in detail, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of trauma. And I know when I grew up, I had neighbors. We all lived in the same area. Now folks are commuting. We have open schools and folks are going from one side to the other. Our neighborhoods don't look the same. So when I walked home, I walked up my street and everybody knew what was happening. And so I had protection from neighbors, from elders, from others. That is not what our communities look like today. So we have to ask our families, we have to ask our communities, where do we need to shift to ensure that our children are protected and they're able to be youth and they're able to enjoy their youth. I did a group focus meeting with the girls at McClymonds. And it was really hard for me to stay focused because I was so shocked at what they were asking for. And when I said, well, tell me what you need, half of it had nothing to do with the school. Half of it was, can we have a hygiene station, Ms. Nzingha? I said, well, tell me about that. They were like, well, when I come to school, if I don't feel good about myself and everything I have, I just can't focus on school. So I was like, a hygiene station. And all the things that would go in a hygiene station that takes care of a young lady. Can we have help for our mothers? So there was a story of a young lady who shared that her mother was on drugs and the system wanted to remove her from the household. And she was like, my mother has been my road dog from day one. I'm not leaving my mother. She has a problem. She's not a problem. She has a problem. So I need resources to help me with my mother because her drug problem is about her emotion. So I was so moved that she understood the extent of, I mean, it almost makes me want to cry every time I think about it, that the extent of her understanding that her mother's drug problem was related to her emotional state of being. And so she said, I'm not leaving my mother. So who speaks to that child, right? Who says, no, I'm not leaving my mother. And so you try to put me in a group home or foster care, don't take away the problem, you actually add to the problem. So the conversation for the youth was about the resource challenge, the food insecurity. But for me, where I sit in West Oakland, and as my work extends out to East Oakland, and that's where I started, the conditions are very different from when I started. And so we have to address the conditions that our children find themselves in today, right now. Yeah, so one of the ways, when I first started doing the listening campaign, I did a 4-month listening campaign to really hear from everyone, from students all the way to families, to teachers, to counselors, and to really think about what they saw. What I really said to myself is, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we have to build out based on capacity. And so we really started with almost like a step-ladder approach. And we're going to step into each of these things as we have capacity. And so we really tried to listen from the mindset of the girls. What are you experiencing and what do you need? And then we tried to add on, what are the families saying that they see, and then what are the teachers saying? And really try to come up with a balance, but with an eye to what do the kids say they really, really want. And so the first thing that they wanted is they needed a space of clarity. And so we said immediately we're going to start having circles for girls, because they needed spaces where they, in some ways, like thought partners. I'm dealing with this. How do we navigate our lives? Because remember, growing up, we had all these different folks: big sisters, big brothers, cousins, other folks, you know, those aunts and uncles that were like, they weren't your parents, but they were willing to like help you. Some of that stuff they are missing. So can we have a circle where we just like take a stab at some of this stuff, where we can talk it through, where we could get it off our minds? And so we began to build out circles in the schools. And so we're now on our pathway of building out circles in high schools with a particular curriculum in mind. And so the curriculum that we're working on now speaks to the conditions and climate for girls, but through their lens. So we have all the data, and so we're building a curriculum, and then we're going to roll out those high school conversations. Well, what are those for? We want you to be able to talk through some stuff so you can then focus on what does academic achievement look like for you. Once you open up the door for girls to be able to share and they build trust, then you can talk about leadership. And so one of the projects that I'm so excited about that we're working on is an academic travel study project. So when my daughter was 10, I said I would start taking her with me everywhere I travel out of the country. I saw the impact on her just being able to go to Africa, being able to go to Brazil. She's been to 2 places in Africa already. And I said, it changed her. It just, her whole persona, where she didn't think about race. She didn't think about gender. I mean, when you're in a place where it's all black folks and they are doing stuff, that changes your whole persona. I mean, just watching her be free, it was something that excited me but almost scared me. And so I said, we have an opportunity to be free anytime we name it. I don't care if you're 50 or 15. When you decide, I got to get free, the doors will open for you. And so I have a great partnership with Peralta, who said, oh, you want to do this? We're going to pay some of that money for you. So parents don't have to pay. So how can AFI pay? How can Peralta pay? And then how can we fundraise? So I talked about, okay, we're going to be researching. And I want you to research conditions for girls and women in the places we go. So our first study abroad will either be Jamaica or Belize. And then the next one will be Africa. And then we'll kind of wrap around the diaspora. That's the first time I saw the light go off. So we're building that out for 8th through 12th graders. For the middle school, we have a Girls Student Leadership Council, which is called GSLC, that's designed to build leaders. Those children are fabulous. This idea that our children don't want to learn is so erroneous. It is, you gotta give them some participation. You gotta give them some agency, some empowerment. And I so wish that people could see this. I so wish that people could see our children flourishing. So for elementary, we're working on literacy, because there's a huge gap in our children around literacy. And for girls, it's really, really bad. So I share some data with the community. Is 3rd grade, 6th grade, 9th grade. The data is pretty bad. We're pretty much between 1/3 and half of our girls are considered literate. So I did some classroom observation the other day to see 8th graders reading at a 3rd grade level. And I could just see her face in a class where she's in the 8th grade, but her work is at a 3rd grade level. And then we begin to understand why there's the acting out. Because if I don't have any agency in my learning, well, where do I have agency? In my social community. So that's where I have social capital, and that's where I build it. So we're adamant about doing literacy work, but the literacy work is about cascading mentorship. So we're going to take our middle school girls and our high school girls, and then they are going to be part of our literacy work with the elementary school girls. I'm ecstatic about it. I mean, I'm trying not to jump out the seat. I'm trying to operate cooperatively, but to watch them reading to middle school girls. And people don't understand, when you read to others, then that improves your reading. What improves reading is more reading. And so to have the elementary school girls look up to middle school girls and high school girls is going to be enormous. Then I have some other plans that I just want to do from my old school work, which is we would love to take the girls on a retreat. We have a Black Girl Power Conference that is hugely popular, and we're going to continue with that. But I also want to take them out into the wilderness, out into places where they can see nature. And so my friend, Rue Mapp, who has Outdoor Afro, we've just been in and out of conversation about how do we take our kids out into the wilderness so that they can see beyond their communities. Because we don't have enough trees in East and West Oakland. And when you don't have enough trees, you can't breathe. And so want to take them into a world that is also beyond the limitations that they're in. I'm not sure if I can identify a group more so than I can identify a mindset. And the reason why I say that is because what I'm seeing that I'm loving is everybody that I call and ask to participate, to help, to support, no one has said no. And that's so encouraging and inspiring. I mean, sometimes I get on the elevator and they're like, "Are you in Nzingha?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, what happened? What I do? They're like, "No, we want to help." I took a leap of faith and I said, I'm just going to name some organizations that I'm just going to say, let me come speak, let me do my presentation, let me talk about what's going on. We did the Brotherhood of Elders Network. There were like 40 brothers in Kingston 11. They said, put us on committees, tell us what you want to do. So I put that in my back pocket. Walking out of there, I felt extremely healed and empowered. Sometimes when you're in the district and there's all the budget stuff and there's all these changes going on, you got to be able to turn to the community and say, we can't do this by ourselves. And so I just see the stars lining up. I think with all those groups, one thing that I'm hopeful for is that we can get organized. So what I've been telling folks is that, yes, we all have our own niche, and yes, we're all going to do our own work, but can we have one meeting by which we can really come together and talk about it? And so Brotherhood of Elders, I said I want to have a breakfast and I just want to get maybe 2 or 3 people from each organization. They said we will help, we will participate, we will help pay, where we can just sit down and I can explain this is where we need to come together collectively. That has to include fraternities and sororities in terms of their reach, and particularly because it helps also college students come in and be a part of being volunteers and supporting. And so I see a movement that I'm really excited about. And the movement is situated in a number of different organizations that have reached out to me that said, I'm willing to help. Yeah, there's one final thing that has been on my heart, maybe 2, and I'll make it brief. We as a community have to think about how we're going to support this work for our children, because state systems are not going to be able to pay for these resources. And then it's true that when I'm looking at who to cut, then I look at things that look like boutiques. They're boutiques, they're not the major thing. So we go back to the basics. And it's really this kind of work that really helps enliven the schools. And so my worry is when we get down to that next level of cutting, and then the next one, that do we have a plan in which we're going to resource this work? Because this is really our community's work. So when community comes in and says, well, okay, I got you, what are the resources to do this? Because if we're asking folks to come in and volunteer, but also make this part of their work, we have to be able to pay people. And I'm adamant about paying people who are doing enormous amount of work. And so I really want to see the community have a fund development and resource plan for Oakland Unified, for our children. The other thing that I want to see is for us to not problematize our children. So if I just flip that script, I want us to really begin to think about what are the aspirations of our children. So part of our work has been, well, what do you want to do? What do you think is possible? And when we ask that of girls, the first thing they want to be is in the health and medical career. The second thing is, I want to be a business and entrepreneur. I'm like, do you know how many entrepreneurs are in Oakland? I'm like, girl, please, I can hook you up. They want to do things. So let's get our mindset away from our children are a problem, and like our children have aspirations, and we need to step into those aspirations with them. We need to dream with them. We need to fly with them until like a bird, a mother in a bird's nest, we push them off and we just say, go, go. There's so many young men that have some great ideas, have some beautiful aspirations, and we just need to say, just like all other folks, I'm gonna put 5 on it. You wanna do that? I'm gonna put 5 on it, I got you. So I want us to just leave with just the potentiality, the possibility of what our children can do. And I just think all things are possible when we look at everybody that we have in our community. I'm Nzingha Dugas, and this has been the SOBEO Narrative Series.